how do you want the band to play with you? Do you need the band? Like, meaning all these guys? And I was like, no, it's okay. We got it. Later, I realized kind of how obnoxious that must have sounded, because he's asking me if I want Jim Keltner and Don Was and Bruce Springsteen and him and Ben Mott to play. And I'm like, no, we got it.
Congratulations on the record.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to start by talking about Spaceman and Tulsa. So, like, when I was listening to it, I was thinking it's sort of about the way kids can feel when they're different in a small town, when they're artistic, when they've sort of gone through a hard time, when their background is different. And then the chorus is like, I'm a caterpillar, which I took to mean like there's some sort of metamorphosis happening. What did you write that song about?
Well, pretty much just what you said. You know, it's about the sort of transformative power of however you decide to express yourself, art, rock and roll. You know, the way that a lot of us grow up feeling out of place and then find a way to fit in the world.
Why was that on your mind?
Well, like a lot of artists, I think I grew up feeling different from other people, and then music kind of gave me a place to be myself. I didn't seem to relate to things the same way everybody else did. Things inside my head felt different than it seemed like it was for other people, although it's really hard to tell what's going on in other people's heads, so you don't really know.
You also moved a lot when you were a kid. I read like 5 different cities before you were 9. Is that right?
I guess 6 before I was 10, something like that.
What do you remember about that? Like always packing up, always leaving?
A lot of first days of school, not knowing anybody. A lot of feeling like I had a weird accent. You know, chasing accents around the country. Being born in Baltimore, it's kind of a weird accent when you get to Boston. Leaving Boston for West Texas is another one that was very strange. You know, and then leaving, you know, the Texas stays with you your whole life. I think that hangs in there. But, you know, just feeling different from other people and feeling like a real struggle to fit in, and also kind of not having the tools for that in the first place, like not being someone who's good at being new, which is still the case. I'm not great at meeting people to this day. I think I had a lot of years with dreadlocks where people came up to me. It made it a lot easier, but I've never been good at going up to other people.
Were you listening to the same music everywhere you went when you were traveling, when you were moving that much? Was it the same? Like, I'm wondering essentially whether music could have been a constant when everything else is changing.
No, music definitely a constant. It wasn't the same kinds of music, but a love of music. You know, grew up with a lot of my parents' Beatles records. Heard some country music when I got into the South. A lot of funk and hip hop. Well, later hip hop when that kind of became a thing. When I moved to Oakland, you know, which was a big thing there. So, you know, constantly being introduced to new music, but that was fine with me. The music I had no problem being introduced to. People much harder.
Were you reading like record liner notes or watching videos and picturing yourself where those artists were? Like, were you picturing yourself in front of the microphone?
Probably. I remember being like 5 or 6 and playing my dad's tennis racket to Can't Buy Me Love, not knowing that A, Paul played bass, and B, he was left-handed, you know, so I had it all wrong, but it didn't matter. Yeah, I mean, I think when I was really young, I mean, I think I appreciated music for its own sake after that, not even necessarily being something I was going to do. I think when I got a little older, to think about it, I couldn't figure out how I had a place in that until I wrote songs, which was later again. I mean, when you're a kid, it just seems natural to do this. But after a while, you realize, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do with that. But I listened, and I went to see concerts. You know, my friends and I would go out and see concerts all the time.
What was the most transformational concert you saw?
I don't know. You know, I think that Jackson 5 concert made a real impression on me. I was only about 7 years old, maybe. But I had this I don't remember it very clearly, but I have this really vivid memory of them being incredibly cool on stage and really tall, like, and dressing really cool. Like, I see myself in that fringe jacket in Mr. Jones, and I think that fringe has got to be something I remember from that Jackson 5 show. Mr. Jones and me tell each other fairy tales, and we stare through beautiful women. She's looking at you, oh no, she's looking at me, smiling in the bright lights. I saw a lot of concerts later that were really blew my mind. But there was this Jay Giles band concert the year before they released Love Stinks at the Oakland Auditorium that was pretty wild. I just remember like the whole audience was Hell's Angels. And normally that might have been a really kind of a intimidating, scary thing, but like, for a bunch of stoner kids who were there, because I remember my friend Steve Penhoet, his dad or his uncle owned like a used Mercedes dealership in Oakland. Uh, and so we pulled into the parking lot at the Oakland Auditorium in this old used Mercedes at like 16. He'd borrowed the car from his dad, so we'd go to the concert. And it was like this one old Mercedes and then 5,000 Harleys, And but I remember like getting high with them outside in the line to get in, and and how cool everybody was to us. Like it might have been an intimidating crowd, but instead it turned out to be this thing where like they were really into the fact that we liked their band. And this was before Jay Giles had the big hits because it was the record before Love Stinks. I remember they played like Love Stinks at the show and no one knew the song and it was cool. But what I remember really, the really impressive thing about it to me and what made a real impression on me was how it didn't matter that we were different. Like we were a bunch of kids, stoner kids, and they were bikers, but we liked Jay Giles' band and they thought that was cool. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, I can hear it. Like I can hear. I think we all know that sort of experience about like going to a concert that where people feel a little bit scary or sketchy to us, but then you realize that you all love the same thing. People talk about this with metal a lot. Like it looks intimidating, but the people are really, really pretty generous and pretty kind. And I get it. Like you're going to these concerts and you're having these sort of moments that are bigger than just I like a song. They're like, oh, I'm feeling safe here, or I'm feeling like less of an outsider. It's really nice. And then you say like you kind of came to songwriting a little bit later than those who were writing songs when they were like 14 or 15 years old. The story I heard was that you were in college. You were in college. Your sister had just come back from a year in Mexico with your mom. You were in Berkeley. Your dad was working a lot. She was home on her own, and she was going through a tough time. And then in the middle of class or something, you wrote this song for her. So what made you want to write a song for your sister? And do you remember what it felt like when the first song showed up?
That's pretty much exactly the story. It was the fall term of my freshman year in college, so my first semester in college. Um, I talked to my sister and she was struggling a bit, but also it's part of like when you're, 16-year-old girls, it's a hard time,
Yeah.
like it's just hard anyways. I don't know, I had written a bunch of lyrics before that. I don't want to call them poems because they were really songs that I had only written words to. Um, but I was in that class and I was sort of doing it again, writing this song, and it was a lot simpler song in some ways. And after class, I just got to thinking, well, I wonder if I could figure out how to play this. I could kind of play, I mean, I don't want to say I could play piano. I knew how to make a major and a minor chord. And I wondered if I could figure out how to play this song. And there was a piano in the lounge across the hall from my dorm room freshman year. And after class, I went back to the dorm and sort of locked myself in that lounge. And I just, dun, 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 good morning, little sister. Da, 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 try to, is that, if you find a note that sort of matches what you're singing. So I sat there trying to figure it out, skipped the rest of the day of school, and just like took me hours. Probably that song would take 15 minutes nowadays, but it took me hours the rest of the day. I locked in that lounge, and eventually I kind of got the whole song. And when I played it, it was a light bulb that went off in my head. Like, oh, I'm a songwriter. Like my whole life changed right then. Everything, when you're a kid, the most defining factor of being a kid is how undefined you are. You don't know who you are really. Everything you do in life is scheduled out for you. People tell you you got to go do it. You got to go to school. You got to do your homework. You that's your whole purpose. Everything else is sort of set out for you. And when you get to that transitional period like college where you're trying to figure out how am I going to be an adult, you're trying to find a way that you're going to want to spend the rest of your life after that. And so you don't really know who you are. And I wrote that song at the beginning of my freshman year of college. And I knew who I was, like right then. Seriously, it was like a fucking light bulb, bells going off. Oh, I'm a songwriter. That's what I am. Oh, everything makes sense. Like all this stuff, like all my life, I'd had all these feelings pent up inside of me, all this stuff I couldn't figure out how to express. Um, Ideas, thoughts, passions, whatever they were, they just seemed to have nowhere to go. Just this tension of stuff. And then, oh, you know what? All that goes into a song. I mean, and the next day I came back and wrote another song. And then all I did in my spare time after that was write songs.
So one of the best stories I've heard about you that I wanted to get from you is this sort of like break moment for Counting Crows. And now that I'm talking to you about this, what strikes me is that that sort of break moment was not you singing one of your own songs at all. It wasn't this extension as a songwriter. So the story goes is that like there was a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was happening. The Counting Crows were doing well. They were getting a lot of buzz. And there was a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony. Van Morrison, in the most Van Morrison thing he could possibly do, does not go. And it's, I think, Cream's that year, and CCR is that year, and Etta James is that year. Robbie Robertson says, hey, there's this band making a record in the Hollywood Hills. Let's bring them. And they ask you to step in. That sounds terrifying to me, especially if you're not singing one of your own songs, you're going to sing a Van Morrison song. What do you remember about that moment looking back?
Well, first of all, it wasn't a break moment. That it's been very retroactively attributed that way.
Yeah.
Now that we've been around for 30 years, that's this big moment. But the truth was, back then, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was very, very private. Like there was no televising of it. There was none of that stuff. There was no public invited. It was all record industry and musicians, period. I'm back in Berkeley when this happens because we were like a week off from recording. And they asked us if we wanted to do it, and me and Immer and Dave Bryson, one of our other guitar players, jumped. My dad picked us up at our house, dropped us off at the airport. On the way, we stopped at Tower Records, picked up a bunch of like Van cassettes to try and figure out what to play. And on the plane on the way down, we sort of decided on Caravan, and we got to like the Oakwood Apartments where we'd rented a place, and figured out a version of Caravan on like guitar, mandolin, and me that night. The next day, this is like on a Sunday. Monday is like the rehearsals, and Tuesday is the show. So Monday, we drive out to the valley to this rehearsal space. As we're driving in, I could hear through the door band playing a pretty good version of Roadhouse Blues by the Doors. When we walk in, it turns out it is the Doors with Eddie Vedder singing.
Oh, cool.
Standing around the corners of the room are Jack Bruce and Eric Clapton, Springsteen, the whole house band, which was Don Was on bass, Jim Keltner on drums, Ben Montench on keyboards, maybe Roy Bittan on keyboards too from the E Street Band, Robbie, and Bruce Springsteen. And who else was in there? The guys from Creedence are all there, or at least John Fogerty's there. I don't know if the other guys are there.
But you're unknown. You're unknown in walking into this room.
Yeah, it was cool.
I have it.
Cool.
I think I have a little bit of the performance. Can we listen to it?
Sure.
If you will now, turn it up, a little bit higher. Radio now, turn it up, just enough, so you know. Radio, I say la 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 la.
That is, I guess, Counting Crows. Adam Duritz and Counting Crows doing Caravan at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I saw you chuckle at one point.
Well, I sounded about 12. I was just remembering, we got in there, and after the Doors finished up, Robbie says, "Hey," introduces us around. So what are you guys going to play? Oh, we're going to play Caravan. Okay. How do you want the band to play with you? Do you need the band? Like, meaning all these guys? And I was like, no, it's okay. We got it. I mean, I didn't realize at the time. Later, I realized kind of how obnoxious that must have sounded, because he's asking me if I want Jim Keltner and Don Was and Bruce Springsteen and him and Ben Mont to play. And I'm like, no, we got it. But the truth is, we figured it out the night before, a version that worked for the three of us. I thought we had it. I didn't want to be a burden or a problem. I mean, we figured it out because we're supposed to play. So you show up knowing what to do, right? And that's a professional thing to do. You show up with your shit together, done. You know, I mean, I didn't have them with me the night before, so I wasn't prepping the song with Bruce Springsteen on guitar. I was prepping it with me and Dave and Immer. So we had it, you know, and I said, no, it's okay. And then everybody looks at me and starts laughing. And I realized, oh, yeah, that must have sounded kind of obnoxious. And I was like, well, I mean, we just figured out a version with just us last night. So, I mean, it's pretty good, I think. And they're all kind of like chuckling. And Robbie's like, okay, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you run it through and we'll listen? You know, I'm sure they're all thinking, no.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so we play it. And when we're done, Robbie goes, oh, that's actually good. Like where I come from, you show up with your shit together. So we showed up with our shit together, you know, and then it was good. It was what they wanted. Like Robbie, when they listened to it, they're like, oh yeah, we like that. So, you know, but the next morning, the only people there are everyone that's involved with this thing. So now it's all of Creedence, Etta James, who's being inducted by Katie Lang, Ruth Brown, Bonnie Raitt, Springsteen, because he's inducting Creedence, members of Sly and the Family Stone, and George Clinton, who's inducting them. I mean, this is the crowd, you know, like, and they're all sitting there at these banquet tables, just because they're, you know, we're running through the rehearsal of the show, and now we're just playing for everybody famous that ever lived. And that's even cooler. I don't know. It's like the whole thing was it was really fun. I had a blast.
I mean, I think again, I can hear that sort of like, I don't know, man. Like I feel like a lot of people would be terrified and it would show up on stage, but you can tell that you were confident in what you were. You were confident, right? Like kind of in the band right out of the gate. I found out from researching you that the Mr. Jones song, which I say like a Dick Clark in 1953, the Mr. Jones song was around before the recording of that. You had that with you for a while. I really enjoyed reading the story about it. But I do have one question about it. So the story is that your friend Marty Jones, who used to play in your old band, his dad was this great flamenco musician, and he was in town. You guys go out to see him play. After the show's over, you go to this bar called New Amsterdam to hang out. That's the opening line of the song. We're down at New Amsterdam. What I want to know is, I guess, first, what do you remember about that night? But what I haven't heard is, like, when did the song come? Did the song come when you got home that night, bleary-eyed, or days later? Like, what do you remember about that?
I tend to write in very specific bursts. I think I wrote the song later that night. It was a really fun night, a little intimidating. Flamenco show was outrageous. The musicianship was off the hook. But it's a whole scene with flamenco. It's not just the playing, it's the singing, it's the dancing. And I just remember later that night, you know, we went to a lot of bars that night, trailing around after this flamenco troupe and getting hammered. And just feeling like this is really cool, basking in someone else's spotlight and kind of wishing it was me in the spotlight, you know? And I think Marty the same way. Marty and I were talking about this like a couple weeks ago. He remembered some stuff I had forgotten about. This older woman who was named Maria, who was this flamenco dancer that he was hitting on that night. I guess he was really, really flirting with, and she was I think she thought he was kind of a kid, but he was really interested in her. I had forgotten some of those details. I don't know how long that song took. Some of them were really quick. I think I wrote it later that night, like in the middle of the night. Wow. When I got home. I'm not sure. That was a long time ago now.
Yeah, fair enough. That song, and then around here, and the performance in SNL brings you guys to this, you know, sort of stratospheric level really quickly. And it's wild to read about from the kind of the newspapers and interviews of the time. What was the most, I guess, like, what was the moment that you most remember that your life had changed? Because people are stopping you on the street, waiting outside your house. You're being written about in like celebrity magazines. Is there a moment that you kind of pinpoint and that you most remember, oh, my life is different now?
Yeah, it was in April of 94. It didn't seem really quick to us. I mean, you got to remember, we'd been, you know, I was 29 when the record came out. I was 27 before anyone from any record company came to see any band I was in, and it wasn't Counting Crows. I was 28 when we got signed, and I was 29 when that record came out, you know, and we had been on the road for about 3 or 4 months as an opening band, opening for Midnight Oil, opening for Suede, opening for Cracker. And after 2 or 3 months, some TV shows started calling us, Letterman first and then SNL. So about 3 months after the record came out, we end up on SNL um, in January of '94. But we're not even in the top 200. I mean, the record's nowhere, which they used to really be cool about that. SNL booked a lot of bands that they thought were great, but that weren't big. And a lot of bands got big because of them, and so when we played on SNL, we were the record was like 213, 214. Mr. Jones was on the radio, but it wasn't a big deal. Um, we had just given the video to MTV a couple weeks before that. So it wasn't like we were a big deal. And we played Round Here first. That was one of the big arguments, is that we wanted to play Round Here first. We thought that was a really defining song. And it was Round Here that we played on SNL that everybody saw.
Yeah.
And the record jumped 40 spots a week for 5 or 6 weeks after that. So we had a few more months of touring. In April, or late March, I think, we played Letterman. And while we were at Letterman, Rolling Stone called wanting to put us on the cover. We agreed to do that. We were leaving for a European tour a week or two later. And so we spent the month of April in Europe. And while we were over there, a lot of stuff happened. Kurt Cobain passed away while we were over there. Rolling Stone did this interview and photo sessions with us. And we flew home at the end of April to New Orleans to play at Tipitina's during the Jazz and Heritage Festival. I'd been going to the Jazz and Heritage Festival for years. It was someplace I was really comfortable. It was kind of a home away from home for me down there. So we flew into New Orleans, and we'd been out of the country for a while. So whatever had happened back here, we weren't here to experience it. And the first morning after we got there, I went out to the festival, as I always did, and got mobbed. And that's when I realized, oh, what the hell happened? This was not the kind of thing that was happening before I left the country. Now I'm back a month later and I'm getting mobbed at this thing I've been going to for years. And that was scary too, because it's not just mobbed on a street corner where there are 10 people. You're mobbed at a music festival where there are 100,000 people there. So, it's a problem. And the next night after that, we played Tipitina's, which fits about 800 or 900 people, but there were 2,000 people outside during the show. They had these sliding walls, I think, and they opened the place up. I hope I'm remembering that correctly, because the whole neighborhood outside was filled with people. And it was those days in New Orleans where I realized, oh, whoa, everything changed.
Yeah.
Like this. And the thing is, we weren't there when it happened because we were out of the country. So when it hit us, it didn't hit us gradually. It was like, whoa. It was very sudden and surprising.
You mentioned that it was around the time that Kurt had died, and one of the things that I'm reading a lot in these articles that are coming out from like 94, 95 is this kind of portraying the Counting Crows as, I don't know if the word is like anti-grunge, but like the opposite force to grunge. You must have had some awareness of that you were being portrayed that way. What do you remember about the way that the band was being portrayed as sort of against another movement?
It's a weird thing. Like, musicians don't think about movements very much.
Yeah.
It's just music.
Yeah.
To me, I don't know that I even thought of grunge as a movement. It was just Nirvana. I knew Kurt. Nirvana was, fucking amazing. That's a great band. I saw them. I knew those guys. They were mind-blowingly good. I didn't realize that the next 5 years were going to be spent with everybody dressing in flannel and wearing Doc Martens. Kurt wore cardigans a lot. He actually wasn't wearing flannel all the time. He often wore sweaters and cardigans, I don't know. I thought Nirvana was genius. And I thought we were both kind of indie college radio bands, because that's what we were until we weren't. It's weird because I think the genre thing is much more outsider influenced. It comes from radio stations and music critics who like to put it in these groups. I didn't really think about any of that stuff. And then suddenly it's like, oh, grunge is a thing. I mean, we're not grunge, but I mean, we were never really anything except for us.
Yeah.
Even in the years after that, there weren't a lot of bands like us. There were bands lumped in there with us, but I don't really think any of them sound very much like us.
And you also acted like a college and punk band. Like I was reading that you had Alex Chilton from Big Star opening the shows. You were skipping award shows to go play with Cracker. You know, you were hanging out with Michael Stipe. Like you were acting, you were doing things that cool bands did, you know?
I don't know. I didn't really think of it as anything other than doing what I wanted to do. You know, we just like Alex was my idol. Big Star was probably the most influential band that I had in my life.
And didn't they boo him? Didn't your crowds boo him?
Well, you had to know Alex too. He loved to Alex had a really hard experience in the music business, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't always pleasant. And he loved to antagonize crowds. That summer was bad all around though, because it was before that you had these crowds that had really discovered us, and they were cool with anything we did, and they were really into all the music we were into and us playing obscure covers by other friends of our bands, you know. And by that first summer tour, I had all these weird bands opening for us. Buffalo Tom, Big Star, brass bands, Soul Rebels brass band from New Orleans, Cox Family, bluegrass music
Oh,
from
I love the
Louisiana.
Cox family. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had all these weird bands opening for us, and the audience like didn't have any patience for any of them.
Right, because they were probably a Mr. Jones audience by that point. They weren't like Counting Crows audience. They were a Mr. Jones audience. They were around here audience.
Yeah, I mean,
you know?
we had been our first headlining audiences were all these college radio kids who probably worked at record stores. I know some of them did, you know, and discovered our record on their own, and they were really into all kinds of weird music. By that summer, they just wanted to hear Mr. Jones, and they had no time for Alex or Laurie Carson or Buffalo Tom or Frente or the Cox family. It was a rough summer with all of my friends and idols being booed by our fans. You know, by the time I got on stage every night, I was ready to choke people.
Yeah. There's a. I don't know if you know the great band, Canadian band, the Tragically Hip, like one of the most important bands. Yeah. And they have stories about, like, I think Eric's Trip, this great kind of punk grunge band from New Brunswick, went on tour with them, and Gord Downey, was the lead singer of the band, said the same thing. Like he just said, like, the fans are driving me crazy. Like, you know, and I think at one point he went out and said, like, I have to either listen to this band or we're not going to go on. You know, like it can get frustrating. You know.
I had some nights like that. We had this one night after Alex had gotten really booed in like pretty sure it was Grand Rapids, Michigan. And at the end of the night, I was so angry. We played this, I think probably incredible show of like just fury. And at the end of the show, I was like, did you guys like that? Yeah. Did you have a good time? Yeah. I'm like, good, because you're fucking assholes and we're never coming back here again. Fuck all of you. And then I walked off stage. Got rave reviews in the papers the next day, and we didn't go back there for a long time. We finally did, like, I don't know, 15 or 20 years later. But I was pissed.
I want to be cautious of time here, but like the story that goes on about you then is, in the midst of all this fame, you're in LA, you go to a party at the Viper Room, you end up, which was a bar which is a bar in Los Angeles. You end up bartending there as a sort of way to escape the fame and a way to escape everything that was happening to your life. Did people ever come in and not know you were there and be surprised that the guy who had the #1 record in the country was serving them a beer?
Some of the only people I knew in LA worked at the Viper Room. I had met people who worked there. I don't remember how I met them at first, but my friends were like the people running the Viper Room and some bartenders there. And so after a year and a half of touring on that album, I got home to Berkeley, and there were people camped out on my lawn. It was like impossible to go anywhere. I'd been home for about 6 days. Our last tour was in Europe. I came home. I literally couldn't go anywhere. And there were people everywhere I went. It was really tough. And I got a phone call one day from Johnny Depp and Sal Janko, who ran the Viper Room. And we chatted for a few minutes, and then they realized something was wrong, and they asked me, and I told them what was going on. And they put me on hold for a while. It was weird, about 10 minutes or more. And when they came back on the line, they said, okay, look, we were calling you to invite you to this party tomorrow or tonight. It's Kate Moss's 21st birthday. Uh, the Viper Room's closed down. We're having a party. You have a reservation on the 7 o'clock flight, Burbank to Oakland. I mean, Oakland to Burbank, on Southwest. We have you a room at the Bellage, which is a hotel right behind the Viper Room. You need to get the hell out of Berkeley. And I was like, okay. They said someone will pick you up at the airport and we'll figure it out. Someone will be there. So I flew down. Shannon, I think, who's one of the bartenders there, picked me up. And I had this great night with all these weird people. It was really cool. It was weird. And I stayed. I kind of didn't go home again after that. You know, I wasn't really a real job, but I was there every night.
Do you remember anyone's drink order? Like, can you tell me someone came like, oh yeah, one time, you know, Eddie Van Halen came in and he ordered you don't remember anyone's drink ordering?
No, I mean, it's a lot of beers. I made a lot of dirty martinis. I mean, I learned to make a bunch of drinks over that period of time. I don't remember anybody in particular's drink order. There were a lot of interesting people there. I mean, it was really cool. I met Allen Ginsberg. I met William Burroughs, you know.
The Beats hung out at the Viper Room?
Yeah. Yeah. It was very, very cool there. Very, like, full of interesting people. I watched in this little hidden room, me and Allen Ginsberg and Johnny and Sal ate Mexican food and watched Adam Ant play. Comeback show, kind of, you know, like, I mean, it was fucking cool. It was just all these really interesting, fascinating people. Gibby Haynes of Butthole Surfers taught me to make ribs by parboiling them first in Dr. Pepper before grilling them. I mean, we had Sunday barbecues on Sunset. It was just a really interesting, cool place. And I loved being there. And it gave me a place to be kind of safe. And by being on that side of the bar, I didn't feel surrounded. But I still got to meet lots of people without having to go up to them myself or stand in the corner of a bar, because they were coming up to me because they needed drinks. So I made friends and met interesting people.
You know, it seems very overwhelming what's been going on here, you know, and I can also, when I'm reading about you and I'm hearing these stories, it's clear you hear like an incredible ambition and an incredible like work ethic to work on this music. You've been pretty open about your own struggles with mental health over the years. A lot of the people you came up with aren't here anymore because, you know, whether they lost their lives to mental health or the coping mechanisms they used to get through it took them away. And I was reading this quote, I think it was in that GQ profile of you, where you talked about how, you know, music used to be all that mattered to you, but things have changed now. So what changed?
For one thing, I've been in a really, really great relationship for, 8 years now. And I think before, nothing mattered to me except for music. And it was kind of all I had, I mean, that's not really the case anymore, but it's still who I am and really, really important. It's just not everything. I don't live and die on it. But it's really, really a big deal. It's so much at the core of who I am. Playing music, writing music. It's really, really important. I don't know that it's less important. It's just, it's not alone in that sort of sphere of things that matter to me.
In sort of a helpful way, like in sort of it can be music can be sort of all encompassing in a way that's not super healthy or helpful.
No, I don't think it was ever unhealthy. The rest of me was unhealthy. The music was always a very good thing for me. It was always like my refuge, my passion, my focus, my reason for breathing. And that's not just writing it and playing it, just listening to it, it was everything to me when I didn't have other things. And it was really good to have music, which I still have. But now I've got some other things too, which is great. Like there are things that matter to me in life as well.
It's a great band record. Adam, I love talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Tom. I really appreciate it.